TheBradRules.
How's it going, guys? So I've been meaning to talk about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Red Sky seasons for quite some time, and we're finally gonna do it. So I was meaning to do this years ago, but then one thing led to another, and I had to basically rewatch these seasons again to get them fresh in my head so we could talk about them here in this video. So this was a very drastic turn for the Turtles. Less comedy, more violence, a harder edge to the Turtles, a redesign, and new villains. This was a crazy time for the Turtles. And what are the Red Sky seasons? What is that even? Well, where does it get its name? It's because the sky is completely red in it. You may recognize this from Batman the Animated Series, and this is no coincidence. Batman the Animated Series pretty much revolutionized what a dark cartoon could be, and that is what the Turtles followed suit on. They said like, hey, we've got this great new cartoon out here, and we've got our Ninja Turtles, which were pretty much waning in popularity, because they certainly were. So this started off in 1994 with season 8, and it continued into season 9, and finally finished up with season 10, where the series would ultimately come to a close. Yes, that's right, 10 seasons. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had fucking 10 seasons all together. And wow, that's a wild ride. Especially when you consider the sheer amount of episodes that were contained in seasons 3 and 4. I mean, we had like 40 episodes, 40 something episodes in those seasons. And it was crazy to imagine that they would make it this far. But yeah, by 1996, the Turtles were pretty much on their way out. And also, I wasn't really into the Turtles as much anymore, sadly, which is kind of weird. It's, you know, how life is, how it kind of comes full circle, and then when you're an adult, you basically love the Turtles maybe just as much, or like with any other property. I think a lot of people probably went through that cycle in life. I don't think that there's anybody who probably like had firm interest in the Turtles or Power Rangers or any of these other famous IPs for their whole entire life without, like, you know, missing something or missing some seasons or episodes or falling out of love with it and not checking in on the franchise. But, you know, I've been pretty consistent with the Turtles when they popped up in 2003, but we're not here to talk about that. We will make a little bit of a comparison because 2003 is known as the darker Ninja Turtles. There's never been a darker take on the series. And while I may agree with that, seasons 8, 9, and 10 are pretty dark. And this art style is pretty fucking slick, I have to say. The redesigns on the Turtles are not really too crazy. They're subtle. Like, really, there's nothing different about them bodily. This time around, they make sure that they're always darkly colored green, pretty much the way they started off in season 1. And to tell you the truth, this is how I prefer that they look. A lot of times they would be colored a little bit differently at times, you know, and while that may not be bad, they make sure that they keep them the same tone of green, and I like the same shade of green, and I do like that a lot. The big thing that really sticks out is that they have these wider gaps in their bandanas for their eyes. Their eyes also are smaller, they have that edgier look to them, so it's pretty cool looking. And the sky is fucking red, as we discussed before. So, I mean, it's pretty apparent that you're gonna see something different when you start this off. And it's not really as jarring as a lot of people would say. A lot of people say, ooh, season 8 is jarring. Ooh, I'm jarred. Not really, because season 7 started a little bit, not a lot, but there was some more tries at darker storytelling. They did try to implement a little bit of a darker tone into some of the episodes, especially with the season finale, where it really ended on a somber note. So, to me, I wasn't really too surprised when checking out season 8. Now, something that really needs to be talked about is the fact that we've got a brand new theme song and a brand new intro.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And I really like this, and there's actually different music on the show as well. There is some returning pieces, but there is some new music on the OST for the show during the episodes. And, it's all really good. And, does it sound a bit more serious? Well, yeah, they're no longer saying Michelangelo's a party dude and all that stuff. So, I guess you could say it is a little bit more. It's a little bit more hard rock oriented, which I enjoy. The only thing that really bothers me about this intro is it's all shit from season 8, basically, that you're seeing here. And they use this intro in season 9 and 10, when we've got Lord Dreg at the forefront. So it no longer makes sense to show, like, Megavolt's ninja, like, getting tossed, and it no longer makes sense to show so much of Shredder when he's not going to be there. So, I don't know, it's very bizarre. And the other thing is how they intertwine these clips from the 1990 movie. Now, I get what they're going for here. The movie had a more serious tone. These seasons are going to have a more serious tone. So, it made sense to, kind of show that a little bit, but in a way, it kind of doesn't fit in the context of the cartoon. Like, hey, remember the movie, guys? Yeah, but I'm watching the cartoon, so why are you showing me the movie? You see what I mean? So, let's talk a little bit about Season 8. So, obviously, we talked about the art style, the red sky there. You can see that there's clear differences. Shredder, sadly, has a new voice actor. And, Townsend Coleman, who is the voice of Michelangelo, he stood in for James Avery, who is the absolute GOAT. Uncle Phil, who did Shredder since the very first episode of the 1987 series. He no longer was acting in this role, doing the voiceover for Shredder. But I have to say, out of all the Shredder voice actors, Bill Martin has got to be my least favorite. It's just it's very, very deep, and I do not like this voice for Shredder. It sounds a bit too mechanical. It also doesn't even make him sound human.
Are you sure this plan will work?
And I get that pretty much everybody tried to do a James Avery voice. Even Jim Cummings tried his damnedest to sound a little bit like James Avery. Even, Townsend Coleman tried it. But it never quite sounded like James Avery, because there's only one James Avery. So, we've got Shredder here. And this is your main villain for this season. But they do deviate a little bit. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So, for one thing, Shredder is no longer, getting picked on by the Turtles. They're no longer tossing pizza pies into his face. Shredder fucking blows up the Channel 6 building. Yeah, that's right. This time, Shredder, he fucking blows it up. And the building does not come back. It's fucking gone after that. And I have to say that is absolutely fucking awesome. Shredder seems like a threat. He was always a threat. Don't let people tell you that he wasn't. But here, this was a dastardly deed. This was something that really made Shredder look fucking evil. And Bebop and Rocksteady, they're a lot more serious this time around. They may have their dopey voices, but they're not joking around. They're no longer, getting tripped up and stuff and goofing up their assignments. No, actually, when Shredder tells them to do something in this season, they fucking do it, and they do it correctly. And, that may be jarring to some people, because even in season 7, they were still goofing up. But man, they're actually competent here. The Rat King also makes a return, and this time he's sporting his hat and trench coat, and they give him red glowing eyes, and it's pretty cool. They even have his rats get mutated big, so it's actually like a pretty cool little episode with the Rat King. But the Rat King is the only other villain of the classic villains, besides the main cast of villains with Shredder and Krang and Bebop and Rocksteady, that you see. So, that's a little bit surprising. But there is a whole host of other villains. For example, you've got Berserko, who is formerly known as Dracus, who actually helped Krang build the Technodrome. He helped design it. So, this guy is done in one episode, but it is cool that they showed him. You also have this 3-part episode containing Havoc, which is led by Titanus, and this is actually a pretty little cool story arc. And it's all about these group of mutants who are basically fooling the Turtles, having them believe that they are a group that is meant to help mutants, when actually they're turning humans into mutants, and they're actually up to dastardly deeds. We also get another villain by the name of Megavolt, and he's another one-off. But yeah, I really do like the Havoc story arc, and I wish there could have been a little bit more, but it's good that it was not dragged out. And we get Casey Jones making one more appearance here, and Byrne, Irma, and Vernon all disappear after this season, and Byrne also does a smear campaign. You may have also noticed that April O'Neil is no longer wearing her yellow jumpsuit and is now wearing more traditional clothing, and I actually like the new outfit that they've chosen for her. And the last episode sees the Turtles journeying into Dimension X, and the Technodrome actually fucking gets destroyed. And at the end of the episode, you wouldn't actually think that the Technodrome got destroyed, because it gets pulled into a pit by this plant creature. So, yeah, I don't think that was a very convincing end to the Technodrome. But there's a lot going on this fucking season. I realize I am, summarizing here, but guys, there's also another thing that needs to be talked about here. This is only 8 episodes this season. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. It truly is. 8 episodes, and all this happens, and they get a smear campaign. You got a 3-part with Havoc. You got all this going on with Shredder and Krang, and they introduced Berserko and all this stuff. Yeah, they crammed a lot into here, and you could say they should have taken their time more with some of these stories, but I kind of like how they didn't drag things out, and that no saga goes on too long here. So it's pretty cool. But the fact that this is kind of supposed to be the end of the main Shredder and Krang arc is pretty disappointing in the end, I have to say. I'm not really convinced that this is like a good way to defeat Shredder and Krang, because in season 9 they don't appear at all. Season 9 is straight up no fucking Shredder and Krang. Bebop and Rocksteady, they never appear again after season 8. So, that's it for them. So let's talk a little bit here about season 9. So this is a Shredder-free season. This is a Krang-free season. There's no familiar villains in this one. Everybody is brand new here. And the main villain is recast to Lord Dreg. And a lot of people are very contentious about Lord Dreg, but I happen to really enjoy this villain. Now, is he a James Avery Shredder? Hell to the fucking no. But Tony J, this fucking legend, voices Lord Dreg and makes this character so good. And he's so evil. And I like his design. He's basically a big insect, warlord. And he looks pretty cool. He talks really cool thanks to Tony J.
You're brash and arrogant. I admire that.
And basically he wants to take over the planet Earth and eventually rule the whole entire universe. So I think they do a pretty good job of establishing Dreg as a threat. And he also deceives everybody, which I kind of like. Now, a lot of people have had a little bit of a point of contention with this because, you know, Dreg looks pretty fucking freaky. He's kind of scary. I mean, he's a big ass fucking bug alien with these glowing red eyes. And people are just gonna believe him that the turtles are bad. But they do a pretty good job of making it believable. He also gives them inventions, like ways of purifying their water. So it makes it seem like he's a humanitarian alien that just kind of wants to come there in peace. And, you know, he's just basically there to help out humans. Now, shouldn't the humans ask why? Well, I guess not. They're probably not that bright. But anyway, the turtles have an altered look with their bandanas. They kind of make their eyes a little bit too big. Like, honestly, their eyes are bigger than they are, you know, in the first 7 seasons of this show. And for some reason, you know, they decided in season 9 that in season 8 that their eyes were too small. So they made them bigger here, and they removed a lot of the gap between the bandana. Now, you could argue that the bandana was a little bit too spaced out in the previous season, but I don't really think it was too bad. It kind of gave him a distinct look. And anyway, besides the bandana, how about the other main character they introduced, Carter? And there's also a lot of hubbub in this about unstable mutations. I kind of like this idea. A lot of people don't. But basically, the turtles are not done mutating yet. Their mutations are actually unstable. Now, I don't know how this is suddenly coming about, but all of a sudden, it just is. And I guess it makes sense because, you know, they're still in their teenage years. They're still developing, so the mutation hasn't really taken full effect yet. So it's pretty cool that they wrote this in. And I don't really think it's overdone. They don't do it in every single episode. And Carter actually ends up getting some mutagen on him, and he ends up becoming a mutant as well. So he's kind of like the 5th turtle here. But, you know, he's a teenager as well. He's the same age as the turtles, so it's a little bit better than Zach. And I kind of do like Carter. I like him, you know. He's not like this super friendly guy who's just like, hey, I'm here. You know, I'm here for you guys. Like, they argue and everything. And that's another point that needs to be made about this. I like that there's more dissension in the ranks. And we did kind of see that, you know, throughout the 1987 show. No, we do see where Leonardo, you know, leaves the team. And we do see where Michelangelo also goes off on his own and they get their feelings hurt and stuff like that. But here it's like they're actually fighting back and forth. And I think that it's pretty cool. I think that adds a lot to the character dynamic. And it shows that things are getting tough, the turtles are getting stressed, and it makes them seem more human. So I enjoy that aspect of it.
You're supposed to be the leader, Leonardo.
And we're supposed to be a team. How can I lead when you guys fight all the time?
Maybe what we need is a new leader.
Now, this is a very focused season. You've got Lord Dreg appearing in every episode. They do deviate a little bit because he does end up contracting some help from Kronos, who's like a Riddler-like character. And I kind of like this guy. You know, he's entertaining. And we also got Medusa, who's a bounty hunter. And they both get an episode apiece before they basically disappear forever into obscurity. But Dreg still appears in those episodes. So, you know, this is a pretty cool season that establishes Dreg and everything. But I'll be honest with you, I really do miss Shredder. I miss Krang. I miss a lot of the old villains. And I gotta admit, it is hard for me too, because I'm watching the 1987 show and there's very few jokes being supplied. Actually, really, like, most of the jokes are kind of supplied by, you know, Raph here. And I get it, you know, he was always sarcastic, always those sarcastic-y jokes. Michelangelo would tell the goofier jokes, but there's no fourth wall breaks with Raph, but he basically makes these sly remarks, and for the most part, I think it fits. It's not that silly, and it works, and the tone is always more serious, and I enjoy that. So, basically, at the end, Drake ends up getting exposed as not really being a good guy, and we end on that note. And then we get season 10 here. And the Turtles, this is the final season. They're redesigned again. And I'm only really talking about again up here with the bandanas. And what did they do to them this time around? Well, I think that this is kind of the best design because they kind of bring it all together. Even though the art, this is probably the least consistent season in terms of the art because the bandana, it gets really weird because there's some times where we see that they came to a happy medium. They met in the middle where the turtles' eyes are not as big, but the bandana is not as spaced out. So I think that's pretty cool. I actually like that, and this is actually one of my favorite turtle looks actually for season 10. But then sometimes, especially in the episode where we get Shredder and Krang returning, and they've actually got to get help from their past selves, which are the turtles that appeared in season 8 when they actually went into Dimension X and Technodrome got destroyed. Those turtles come back, and they're wearing the classic spaced out bandanas. So maybe there's some continuity there. But then what's kind of crazy is then that the turtles that are actually from the present day, they actually fucking have the same look. And you kind of see this throughout certain episodes. Sometimes they got this look, sometimes they got that look, and it's pretty crazy altogether. I really, it's crazy to see. It's like all over the place sometimes, but it's really not that bad. It's not noticeable, but I was the one kind of confused, and especially I knew I wanted to do this review. So for the sake of accuracy, I was like, let me take a close look here. And I'm like, yeah, it's really not that consistent. And Raphael actually had two other alternate voice actors in Thom Pinto and Hal Rail. So I don't know why they didn't go with either one of them, but Michael Goh is pretty good as the voice.
Sensei, that's deep.
Too deep for me.
So Dreg is still here. He's still the main villain. We get Dreg kicking his second in command to the curb, High Tech, and instead Mung takes over. And I enjoy Mung more as the sidekick to Dreg. I think he's a lot better. It's kind of like his own little personal Igor, the yes master kind of attitude. And I enjoy that.
The picture from the remote microbot we placed on the reptile is coming in now.
So we get Shredder and Krang reappearing, and Dreg and Mung bring them out of Dimension X. And the whole ploy is to suck them of their life force along with the turtles. And they want to get the knowledge from Krang and Shredder of their exploits with the turtles, so they can finally defeat them and conquer the universe, finally. And this is pretty cool how they brought all these villains together. And, I have to say, though, even though we got Shredder getting his time to shine, and he's kind of at a disadvantage because he doesn't have the Technodrome, they don't have all the weapons from Dimension X. But, it's pretty cool seeing them. But they kind of do sort of feel a little bit like afterthoughts at times. And it still feels like Dreg is in control. And that's fine. He's a new villain. We've had Shredder and Krang in control for so long. But what I really don't like is at the end of this 3-episode arc, Shredder and Krang are just tossed, onto the transporter pad, and they're just whisked away to Dimension X. And that is the last we see of them for the whole entire series. And it just feels very dissatisfying. Not that I don't like this 3-episode arc, but it kind of doesn't really get realized to its full potential. I feel like maybe they could have done a little bit more with Shredder and Krang. And it just kind of also doesn't feel quite the same because Krang is weakened. The Turtles are also weakened, taken from their life force. They have to call on their past selves because we have these time travelers by the names of Landor and Merrick who help out with this. So it's very eventful, but, you know, it's also like, I'm also not the craziest about bringing the past Turtles, you know, into the future. Like, I don't know. I think that they could have done a little bit better than that. Like, time travel's never really been a big thing for me, and I don't know. I just think that they could have gone about this a little bit better. And maybe found a cure to get their life force back in some ways without having to rely on this. I don't know. Things feel very convoluted in these 3 episodes, I'm just going to say. Like, there's a lot going on, and some of it really doesn't need to happen. And I think it could have been a little bit more satisfying. But yeah, Shredder and Krang kind of get the shaft in this one, and it doesn't really sit that well with me. One thing that's really strange is Carter goes with Landor and Merrick to the future to cure his mutation, but I don't understand why he doesn't come back after this. It's like, was there supposed to be a season 11 and he's just not there? I don't get it. It's a very strange conclusion to Carter's story. They keep centered on Dreg through pretty much all of season 10, and the only time they really deviate from it is with the Globfather episode. And I actually really like this episode. I think it's kind of cool. You know, he's kind of like a goofier bad guy, but, you know, he's still pretty serious. And it's actually pretty dark, you know, how he turns people into amoebas. So that's pretty frightening. But then we get the season finale. So, you know, basically to summarize, all the mutations have been cured. You know, Leonardo goes a little bit berserk. He gets like a further mutation. And Dreg hits Leonardo with a plutonium ray, which makes him highly combustible. He's gonna go critical mask, and the Turtles manage to save him and also seemingly cure his mutation. But Dreg remarks that Leonardo may appear to be back to normal, but his genetic code has been altered. And they never go back to this ever again, this plot point. It's a pretty big plot hole, and it's very mysterious, and I thought maybe I missed something. So I looked back, and no, right after this episode, they go right to the 3-parter with Shredder and Krang. So I don't know what that's all about, why they left that hanging out there. It's kind of a pretty big plot hole when you think about it. This guy was about to fucking explode just moments ago. Now he's back to normal. They cure his mutation. And what is this about his genetic code being altered? Because there's no more mutations after this. They never go back to it again. And this is the season where the series ends. So I don't know what they were doing. If they were writing this episode to episode, and maybe there was something with the ratings and they just dropped this storyline and just said, you know what, let's bring back Shredder and Krang. I think that's probably what happened, but I can't confirm that. But once they get that taken care of and Leonardo's back to being A-OK, it's time to finally take the final fight to Dreg. So Dreg puts on this exosuit, and you know, he takes the powers of certain aliens, and it's a little goofy. You know, he's like rolling around like a boulder, you know, like in a couple of scenes. But it's a pretty cool idea. Like, this is his final weapon, his final stand against the Turtles. So the Turtles actually go to the wrecked Technodrome. Well, Donatello and Michelangelo do. And they get Krang's android body. And they battle against Dreg in the suit. And they end up pushing him into a portal, along with the android body that's about to reach critical mass. And that is the end of Dragus. He probably gets blown to smithereens off screen. And that is the end of the Ninja Turtles. And it ends basically with Splinter telling the Turtles that he is not their sensei anymore because he has nothing more to teach them and they are now his equals. And there's just something about this where it doesn't feel fulfilling. Like, you would think, like, after you watch this, you would be like, oh yeah, that was satisfying. I'm happy that, you know, that ended like that. Now they're equals. There's nowhere else where this could go. The Turtles are true pros. But really, it has to be said that that is not really the case. You know, there was no resolution between Shredder and Splinter, the rivals. You know, Splinter never had that last battle with Shredder, which is very disappointing. And I don't know, it ends on a popcorn joke where they make fun of Donatello's cooking, and it just does not feel right. It does not feel like, I mean, there's part of it where with the Splinter part, it does feel like it is a series finale. It does feel like it's wrapping up things, but like Shredder and Krang are never heard from again. This is how they defeat them. They just send them back to Dimension X. And I mean, obviously they're going to come back. And, you know, I don't know. Maybe they weren't certain that this was going to be the absolute final season and the final episode. But, you know, it was. And, I mean, for what it was a pretty good episode. It's not one of my favorites by any means. The fact that they go back to the wreckage of the Technodrome, there is something that feels a little bit more final about that. I'm also surprised that the Technodrome was actually destroyed. And, you know, like when I first watched, as I said before, Season 8 and saw those, the plant taking the Technodrome down into that pit, I didn't think that that was like the end of the Technodrome. I thought that was like one of the many temporary setbacks that Shredder and Krang had to face involving the Technodrome. I didn't realize that that was it, that it was like damaged beyond repair. Like they couldn't get it free with all their weaponry. I don't know. Anyway, I mean, that was basically it. So guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. You know, did you enjoy the Red Sky season? Do you think that the Turtles ended on a good note? Do you think it could have been so much more? I can't wait to discuss it. This is actually, I'm very excited to talk about this with you guys. It's actually a very controversial set of seasons for the Turtles. And guys, please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell to get all the notifications when I post all my new videos. I want to thank all my subscribers for your continued support. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.